There's no dispute on this issue. And there's no reason that we should allow it to distract it from our collective responsibility to ensure that our democracy is as strong, fair, and inclusive as possible. So let me be clear once again. Whatever reason might be advanced, this Department of Justice will oppose any effort to disenfranchise American citizens.
The legal fight over the voter ID law in Texas has heated up to a boil. The Justice Department has demanded that state lawmakers turn over their work papers related to the new law, but Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott says those are privileged communications. The Justice Department insists the law, which would require most voters to have a photo ID, will discriminate against minorities. Here for a fair and balanced debate, two members of the Texas congressional delegation, Republican Louis Gohmert and Democrat Henry Cuellar via Skype. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Well, good to be with you.
Good. How are you?
Congressman Cuellar, I want to start with you. I mean, several of your Democratic colleagues sent a letter to a state senator in Texas decrying this law and speaking out against it. You didn't sign on to that letter. Do you approve or disapprove of this law?
Well, I disapprove. But let me explain why. The state has an interest to prevent voter fraud. I don't have a problem with that. We have to uphold voter confidence. I agree with that. The problem is that there's already some state law, and I say this as a former chief election officer for the state of Texas, as the Secretary of State. I do understand that there is, the law calls right now for the state of Texas penalties up from 2 years to 10 years up to $10,000 penalty. There's federal law also that calls up to 5 years of penalties if there's any sort of voter fraud. And the problem has been this. In the last 10 years, there's been only one case of in-person impersonation, only one. Most of the problem is what we call invalid voting. The law did not address to that. We ought to find if there's a problem, if we call one case of voter fraud in the last 10 years of in-person voting a problem, let's sit down and do it in a bipartisan way instead of saying this is the only way we can do it.
Congressman Gohmert, with those other protections in place, why is this new law necessary?
Well, first of all, you don't catch people that are not required to use a voter photo ID. And I know that Erik Holder is such a busy man. He said he didn't have time to read the Arizona law before he sued Arizona. So I'm sure he hadn't had time to read the Crawford versus Marion County Election Board case from 2008, where Justice Stevens wrote the opinion and said the law, Indiana law, after which Texas modeled its, was constitutional. It was fine. And if you can't afford a photo ID, you'll get one free. But we've got to use photo IDs. I mean, you have to have a photo ID to get in to see Erik Holder. Is he that much more important than a secure election around the country? I don't think so. And if we don't do that, we're back to the days of Chicago in 1960 or Lyndon Johnson, the way he joked, but historians say it's probably true, about being in a cemetery writing down names of people that needed to vote, and his campaign manager saying, come on, Lyndon, we can't even read that tombstone. And he said, no, sir, this man has every bit as much right to vote as anybody else in this cemetery. We need to finally get away from those days.
And Congressman Cuellar, you mentioned that there hasn't really been a lot of crackdown on voter fraud. There haven't been a lot of legitimate cases where people have been convicted. Your Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott says that both the Justice Department and the Texas AG's office have prosecuted and won convictions. These are his words, quote, in scores of cases. Is that not accurate?
Well, I think what he's talking about are those invalid cases. There are a lot of voter fraud, but we're talking about in person when somebody goes up there, and this is why we need an ID, or this is why they're asking for a photo ID. I understand that the Supreme Court has already said that a voter ID is constitutional. I don't have a problem with that. It's what type of voter ID that you have. Keep in mind that one of the things that we saw was that if you look at it, there's 81 counties out of the 254 counties in the state of Texas that do not have a DPS office where they can go get a voter ID. Just keep in mind, one of the state senators that said that some people have to travel up to 176 miles round trip to go up there. And by the way, only 49 of those offices across the state of Texas actually have extended office. So there is a problem with what type of photo ID. I support a voter ID. I don't have a problem with it. It just depends what sort of voter ID. Why not accept an amendment that would have allowed any sort of state issue ID, but they prevented that. Again, if this is such a problem, I think this should be something that both Democrats should work with the Republicans, but unfortunately they denied most of the Democratic amendments to extend the number of photo IDs that we could use.
Congressman Gohmert, very quickly, closing word to you.
Well, I know a lot of these things that Henry is pointing out, and he's a terrific guy, and I know he has a lot of sensitivity for the voters, but we can actually make those available. We ought to be able to work something out to get that done at the post office. But all of these things were said in 2008 in Georgia when they had the photo ID. Actually, more African Americans voted in Georgia in 2008, an increased number, than voted in Mississippi the same year. And Mississippi didn't have the photo ID requirement. So it's not as scary as people think unless you're trying to commit voter fraud. And I look forward to working with Henry in the future. Thanks, Shannon.
All right, Congressman Gohmert and Cuellar, we thank you both, and we look forward to hearing about your unification activities working together and making some progress. Thank you both, gentlemen.
Good. Thank you.
That's my good friend Louis. Thank you. Thank you.